Thank you and welcome to Q&A with S&A. I'm Andrea and with me is Shane as always, but today our very special guest is Ashley Tickell. And Ashley is a friend of ours as well as a client of Aintree Group's as well as a billion other things to us. So thank you for coming on to Q&A with S&A,
Thank
Ashley.
you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here.
I'm so glad that you're here, even though you're on crutches. So the crutches are out of vision, but Ashley is here hobbling around with us today because she has hurt herself. So
anything for friends.
Yes, exactly. So we appreciate you coming in. I really do. Thank you for coming in. So I'm not going to say anything because you're going to tell us about who you are and what you do, because there's no possible way that I can cover everything. So tell us a bit about what is going on at the moment in your life and where you've this is a really broad question, how you've gotten to here. So
Absolutely. Oh, man, where do I start?
Yeah.
So at the moment, I'm a theater producer.
Mm-hmm.
I run an independent theater company called Salty Theater, and I am also an associate producer for Vast Productions, a company that is run by Alex Vast, who also owns the Alex Theatre in St Kilda.
Mm-hmm.
So producing, in terms of work, producing is my life right now. I absolutely love it. I guess I kind of pride myself on being willing to take risks in theater, musical theater more specifically, that other producers on a more commercial scale aren't always ready or able to take, which I completely understand when they've got millions of dollars riding on it. But yeah, I work with artists to help bring their shows to life. I build relationships with producers and writers and directors locally, interstate, and overseas in order to bring new works to Australia and premiere them for the first time. And I really do everything in my power to be able to support artists on their journey, no matter what stage of their career they're in, to be able to create work that they feel passionate about, that they don't always have the ability to create because of time, because of costs, because of access. And and all of that kind of came to be out of my love for musical theater that started when I was 9 years old and saw The Phantom of the Opera. I started as a performer in musical theater, fell in love with it. Then I moved to New York and had a whirlwind 3 years there, moved to Los Angeles where I met my husband. We got married and had a son, and I thought, I'm going to quit the industry for a little bit because that doesn't seem conducive to a normal life.
Yeah.
And a few years of no theater, I looked at my husband and said, oh, God, I think I need it back in my life. So here I am.
Yeah. So you started as a 9-year-old in music theatre.
Yes.
What are the highlights?
Oh, my goodness. I think the first highlight, the first musical I ever auditioned for, I got very lucky and I landed the lead role of Annie in the musical Annie. And that kind of really gave me the bug for the rest of my life.
And where was that?
That was just outside of Toronto. That was a Toronto. I'm from Toronto.
Yes, I was going to say.
You can tell my voice is a
quite
little
have
different.
There's no Aussie accent there. Yeah.
So I did a Toronto season of that, and from there got the ball rolling. I had the honor and pleasure to work at the Stratford Festival of Canada and the Shaw Festival as well, which are two major festivals in North America. And also was the voice in a number of cartoons and just found my way into a very fortunate, I guess, and very privileged life in entertainment and theater and the creative arts from a very, very young age.
Yeah. And your time in New York?
Yeah, my time in
That
New
is
York.
probably like, so because this podcast is, broad net. There's no, we're not talking business or anything like that. The people who listen to this podcast could potentially be young music theatre performers who are thinking to themselves, Melbourne isn't the place for me. I'm going to go somewhere. So, and New York, like that is the pinnacle of what a music theatre person would want to be part of. So
absolutely. So very much I was chasing the bright lights of Broadway. It was amazing. It was exhausting. It was exhilarating. It it was inspiring. It was defeating. It was like everything you might imagine it would be for a young theatre performer.
How old were you when you were there?
I moved there when I was 25 and was there until I was about 28. And I never made it to Broadway. I got off Broadway and I did a whole bunch of other projects and also created my own, which was really exciting. I did with a dear friend who's still a dear friend of mine, a cabaret called Heartache Milkshakes in Broadway that we wrote and produced and performed at Don't Tell Mama, which is a renowned cabaret venue in the city. And I also helped pay the bills by being a singing waiter at Ellen's Stardust Diner.
I imagine that some of our listeners have probably eaten at Ellen's Stardust Diner, including the people across from the table.
We have. Yes.
So I was one of the poodle skirt wearing, singers with the milkshakes and coffee, and it was great. It was a great time and a great opportunity to just play in, between gigs. And it was a blast. And what else? I think I also, in the time that I spent working in the industry in Canada, you move to a place like New York and you go, oh my goodness, I thought there were a lot of people in this industry kind of all vying for the same things in Canada. And then you move to New York and it's a completely different world. And there are performers getting in line for open calls, getting in line at 4:00 in the morning, getting their makeup on and hoping that they get through the door and get seen for 16 bars, which is all of 10 seconds.
Yeah, wow.
And that was the reality of what it was like as a young performer there. And sometimes you get lucky and sometimes you just end up with a whole bunch of stories. And either way, I think it's just an experience that if you're passionate about theatre, just have a crack if you can.
Yeah. I think you and I have talked about off camera about the fact that theatre and performing and music and, any of those sorts of things in general are a lot of it is to do with luck.
Yes.
And being in the right audition at the right time, because you're not like everybody is pretty amazing. Like most people who would put themselves in line at 4:00 in the morning have been through all the training and so everybody is really equal in terms of skill, and it's really just yes, you're the exact person that we need for this show or whatever. So
it's so true. And I think now being a producer and directing as well and being on the other side of the table, I recognize that in such a bigger way because I see just the incredible talent that we have here in Melbourne and in Australia as a whole, with some people from interstate who've come through as well. And we could cast shows 10 times over, but there are so many other factors that come into play, whether it's just the way the chemistry works between two people or the age somebody might look who has to play a mother or a son or a daughter, or even just timing, if someone has more availability versus less availability. And I think the old joke that people say about, oh, maybe they remind me of their ex-girlfriend or something like that. I feel like, I haven't had that experience on our table, on our panel, but I can understand how that could be, like, it's a joke, but to a certain extent, those things do come into play. So often, and it's so important to me as I build relationships with artists here in Melbourne, is to send out those personalized emails and make sure that they recognize how grateful we are to have them into the room and for them to put such passion and energy and effort into what they're doing, and for them to know that it's not always about how talented they are. There are so many more factors that come into play. And now more than ever as well, when we're looking at casting diversely and casting with like accessible casting in mind and disability in mind, there are so many there's such a puzzle that needs to be put together.
Yeah.
Now, Toronto, New York, Melbourne's quite a distance from
It is.
both
There
of
was
those.
New York. There was LA in between.
Sorry, LA in
so
between.
that's
I missed that one.
not
So
quite
LA.
like
All right, let's maybe a little bit about LA and then to Melbourne. That's a long way to come. And why are you in Melbourne?
Why am I in Melbourne?
Yes.
I'm married a Melburnian. So definitely for family. Jeremiah and I met at a bar called the Hollywood Happy Ending Bar, which sounds much more dubious than it actually is. It was a sports bar. And I was serving him coffee for 3 hours while he watched a soccer match. Mm-hmm. And everything happened very quickly from there. And when we realized Los Angeles wasn't really an awesome place to raise a family, mm-hmm. we went back and forth between whether or not we'd want to move to Canada mm-hmm. or if Australia was an option. And I thought about moving back to 6 months of dark gray and cold and said, let's try Australia.
And then you moved to Melbourne.
And then we came here. Yeah. And I love it. I love Melbourne. It's an amazing city. It reminds me a lot of Toronto in some ways. And it's been a really great place for me to, I guess, find a new path in my career and kind of do the work that I need to do to build from the ground up. It's been really exciting.
Yeah. So Salty Theatre, tell us about how you feel about Salty Theatre and what you're wanting it to be in the industry for Australia, because we've already talked about how you're doing things a little bit differently when you're casting and when you're dealing with individual artists. You're trying to be really, give them feedback, which is not typical for a theatre company. Normally it's just like, oh, yeah, sorry, you're not the right person. And, those personalised touches and really developing the community around it. Tell us why you've decided to do that for Salty Theatre.
I think having been in the industry as a performer for so many years, I recognize the struggle that performers go through when they're preparing for work, when they're trying to get work, when the work doesn't happen. And it was hard. It was really difficult, I think, even without you knowing it, especially as because I started so young, it impacts your self-confidence. It impacts your mental health to a certain extent, worrying about what other people think all the time and people pleasing. And I struggled with all of that for a long time. Just feeling like I wasn't good enough. Yep. And I know that is still a struggle for many people in this industry and in building a company and working with artists regularly. I wanted to do everything I possibly could to not feed in to those issues that are so prevalent, and to do what I could to help artists feel more supported so they can come into the room and know we're all there together to create something really special, whether it's for a whole season or whether it's for 15 minutes in an audition space. Yep. And I think that was a big part of it initially for me. I also recognize that in Australia, the way theatre, at least in Victoria, and I think throughout the country, they don't have regional theatre isn't really a thing. Repertory theatre, for the most part, isn't really a thing. And they've got this big gap between, you have amateur theatre and community theatre. The budgets are magnificent, but they don't pay their actors, which is heartbreaking considering the quality of show that they're putting on. Yeah. So that was frustrating. And then the indie theatre scene, there's so many exciting things happening, but it just isn't getting the support it needs. And then the commercial space. So there's just like this massive gap between commercial and everything else. Whereas in Canada and in the US, they've got regional theatre and summer stock where you can jump from show to show for 6 weeks at a time, 8 weeks at a time, and work. You can work more consistently. There's more opportunity. And I wanted Salty Theatre to, over time, kind of become a theatre that has the potential to be that in this space, to be that middle ground that kind of feels like an off-Broadway style theatre company where we're taking more risks because we don't have, look, it'd be amazing to have a multi-million dollar budget. Let's be honest. But when you're working with a certain amount, you have to be creative. You have to get creative. And it allows you to take more risks because you're like, well, what do I have to lose? I'm all in. And so with Salty Theatre, I want to be able to create those opportunities for artists to be the first person to play a particular character in a new show, to try out new Australian musicals, and beyond that to be, I guess, a bit of a bridge between Australia and overseas companies. I've had so much fun over the last few years getting to know producers and writers in the States, in the UK, because I'm premiering these new shows that haven't been done here. And that allows our talent to also get to know overseas talent and have the opportunity to meet them and know that if they ever want to try building a career interstate or overseas, they have connections. They have people that they can talk to. So it's, I think, really about creating this wonderful community where artists can do the work, feel supported trying something new, get paid to do it, and just feel really creatively fulfilled in their art and make really good shows that audiences love.
It's, as you said, the community theatre in Melbourne, and my experience is obviously in Melbourne, community theatre in Melbourne is huge. And they put on big shows, like the shows that would normally be put on by the, commercial production companies, and they're putting on big shows. And so much of what they do is reliant on their cast being in full-time jobs elsewhere, so therefore they don't need to be paid.
That's right.
And they have such a big community around all of their production stuff. So, costuming and everything, they look to their communities to get props and costumes and, mums that might help sew costumes and things like that. And, and, as an independent company, you are deliberately trying to not do those sorts of things. So tell us a little bit about, as an independent company, what that means in terms of how you go about trying to find funding. This is a big one.
This is such a big one.
Probably something that is really good to talk about on this podcast, because hopefully there's somebody out there listening who says, I'd really like to be involved with what Salty Theatre are doing. So
Absolutely. Like, for independent theatre, funding is really difficult to come by. Government funding, the opportunities for that are few and far between when you're competing with commercial producers or government funded, like consistent government funded bodies like FTC. And so, you try and try again, and 99 times out of 100 you're getting knocked back, and even then that would only cover a portion of what the budget is for a show. So it becomes a lesson in patience. In I think putting your money where your mouth is. My husband and I, up until this year, have had to invest our own money into making things happen and lose money in order to make those things happen. I look at that as a learning opportunity for me. It's education. It's an investment in what I'm trying to build.
Definitely an investment, yes.
Yeah. And really trying to build those relationships with people who love the arts and are passionate about what we're trying to build and create. So we're trying to be able to showcase that we are doing things differently. We're creating opportunities for people that commercial ventures may not be able to create. And I've been very, very lucky this year in that in coming on board with the Alex Theatre and Vast Productions, they're sponsoring this production for the-grinning-man, which is wonderful. But even then, the more I learn, the more I realize there's still more that needs to be done. For example, right now we're trying to figure out where investment can come from for accessibility for our show. The context of the show, it's very dark and very beautiful and has these wonderful themes of hope and acceptance and love. But it also deals with a time in history when people who were different weren't treated really well. And there's one character in the show also who's blind. So in order to make sure we're casting the show properly and working with our artists in, a safe, inclusive, and sensitive way, we have a wonderful consultant who's come on board to work with us. But we're also trying to get tactile tours and audio descriptions. And all of this is really expensive.
Yeah.
It's really expensive. And I didn't allot the right amount of funds in the budget because I didn't know. It's all just a massive, massive learning process. And you would be shocked at how little accessibility funding exists in this state, in this country.
Yeah.
You would think that that's something that would really, really be supported. It's not.
Yeah.
And we're struggling. We're struggling to find that. And
Yeah.
we're getting very creative. So we can make it happen in whatever way we're able to. But that might mean for this show, some things might not happen that we'll have to prepare for differently at the next one. But yeah, funding is a major challenge. You have to get creative. You have to call in favors with friends and loved ones. And you know that you're doing what you're doing because you're passionate about it and believe in it. And it's not just about being a commercial success, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, you and I have had conversations before about how difficult arts funding is generally, and then add the inclusivity and accessibility funding on top of that. And you're not, you don't have skill and whatever in all of those things, and you're navigating all of this information. There's no magic consulting, theatre consulting business that comes in and says, oh, Ashley, you want to put on this show, I can help you with all of these things. You're navigating it yourself while you are trying to put a show on, while you're actually trying to put on 10 other shows at the same time. So it's, it's not a magic thing that happens. So when people, I think, we often think when you go and see a show, what we're seeing is just, an hour and a half or 2 hours of performers on stage, and nobody's ever sitting there thinking, gee, I wonder how they funded this show.
No.
Which maybe that should be a thing. Like maybe you should put it in your programs from now on. Like, we actually can't fund this show, so,
so please help us out and cover
$5
X amount of costs. Seriously. I know you paid for your ticket, but that wasn't enough because we're trying to make our ticket prices accessible also.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a big thing too, that, we know that to go to a big show at one of the big theatres, you're sort of looking at, maybe $100 plus, which you've always talked about making sure that, you want as many people to be able to access theatre as possible.
That's right.
And so you've got that decision to make as well. You could easily put ticket prices up and maybe not have to try and fund as much funding. But it's a double-edged sword, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And you want to make it accessible for people to be able to enjoy live theater because it's such a gift. You also want to make sure that you have money to pay your artists because they're donating their time and talent to what you're doing too. And, everyone needs to put food on the table. So I think it's an ongoing battle funding in this industry. And I know the money's out there. It exists. There are, multimillionaires and billionaires within a 20-kilometer radius outside of the Alex Theatre. There's many.
Yeah.
But how do we as a creative community reach those people and allow them to understand that we're a company or other independent companies are doing quality work and are doing good work and making a difference in the industry, in the community, on the wellness of these artists and teaching them what it takes along the way to build a career where they're able to survive and not just struggle paycheck by paycheck. There are so many lessons that we try and learn and impart onto the people that we work with. And I think part of that too as a producer, I feel like there's a lot of people in the industry, or there used to be, maybe less so now, where ego was came into play in a big way. When someone's in charge, there's a lot of ego. I have learned so much in the last 4 weeks as I've navigated consultancy and accessibility. I've had to put any kind of my little me, Ashley, who was such a people pleaser and never wanted to do anything wrong ever. I've had to kind of go, Ash, it's okay to be wrong because that's where the good stuff happens. That's where you learn. That's how you grow. And man, I have grown in the last 4 weeks. And I think that there's a certain level of ego that you just have to kind of put at the door and go, it's okay to make mistakes. You don't always have to be perfect or present as perfect, because if you do, then you're never giving yourself room to become better. And there are so like in the independent space, in the commercial space, I want to be able to bring everyone together and go, we can all do better. We can do so much better if we just don't worry about what other people think all the time, which is hard in this industry because we're all so over concerned about what other people think.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, it makes such a difference to be able to go, let's just talk. Let's just have a conversation. Tell me where I messed up and I'll tell you how I can make it better. And it's really exciting, actually, those conversations. Once you get past the scary bit, it's really inspiring. And we just need help and support to be able to have more of those conversations.
Yeah, exactly. So what you and Salty Theatre do really well is help develop shows and help develop artists. And as I said before, what your focus is the community that is surrounding you. I know of a particular show that you've been trying your hardest to get some traction with.
Can we say it?
And
we can say it.
I'm not going to say it, but you can say it because it's your baby and it's it's there. Tell us about that, how that came about for starters. So you tell us what the show is. Yeah. Tell us how it came about, and then talk a bit about your relationship with the person who has written that and how that has all developed.
Absolutely. So the show we're talking about is Paper Stars. It is a beautiful new Australian musical about the life of P.L. Travers, who wrote Mary Poppins. Many people have no idea that P.L. Travers is Australian. Yeah. She kind of kept it a secret for a long time. But this musical explores her life as she leaves Australia and creates Mary Poppins. And our creator of the show loves to say the show's done with just a spoonful of creative license. But a lot of it is, it's based on facts and grows from there. And this show came to my attention in 2020 when we did a call out for the Hatch Lab, which is a new musical development program that was developed through Salty Theatre. And we had the good fortune to have a number of beautiful works come across our desk. But as soon as Paper Stars came in front of me, I said, I know this is the one. This show needs life, and I think it has a really bright future. So I began conversations with Miranda Middleton, who has now become a dear friend and colleague over the last few years. And we started workshopping it. We spent, I'd say, about a year and a half all up doing workshops with professionals in the industry, mentorship sessions with producers and directors like Michael Rubinoff, who created Come From Away, Dean Bryant, who's everywhere at the moment, and a number of other wonderful artists, and began to develop it and got to the point where we had an industry staging that you and Shane were so wonderful to come to and support, and get some feedback from people in the industry, from professionals who've been around the block. And from there, we kind of went, okay, now what's next? We had initially planned to do a fully staged version, but unfortunately that wasn't able to happen due to many lockdowns. And for a time, Miranda took the show and was fortunate enough to workshop it at the VCA, bring it to the Australian Musical Theatre Festival in Tasmania, and has continued to develop it over the years to where it is now. And Miranda has come on board. She's the director of Grinning-Man as well, so we're in each other's pockets daily at this point. But we've come together again now, and we're actually working together to bring Paper Stars finally to the stage in a final development preview season before it has its official world premiere. So that's where we are at the moment with this beautiful show. We are, of course, seeking funding. Developing a new musical costs a lot of money. Yeah. And the thing of it is, when you're going into a development phase, even if you're selling tickets for 5 shows, chances are, if there's more than 2 people in the cast, you're not going to make money back. You're losing money up front. Yeah. But when you believe in the product and you believe that you're going to be a part of it for the long haul, and you hope that eventually in time that will come back to you.
Yeah.
So we've applied for grants. There are more that we're looking to apply for. We've put together an investment prospectus pitch deck, and we are just scrambling to bring this show to life so we can premiere it, or I guess preview it, do a small season in Melbourne at the Alex Theatre at the end of this year in order to be able to get more feedback, do a final workshop, and finally premiere it to the world as a main stage production in 2025.
Yeah.
So that's where we are.
Excellent. I think
exciting.
it is.
It's
It
so
is exciting.
exciting.
Having seen the stage reading of it, it's exciting for us to know that it's taken a long time though, and aside from COVID, which put a real damper on where it was going.
Absolutely.
But I think it's a good lesson for the people listening who might be, into watching shows or even TV shows or movies, is that they don't someone doesn't just all of a sudden scribble down a script on a piece of paper and then next week somebody's putting on a show.
It's the next Hamilton.
We don't see that a lot here because, and you alluded to off-Broadway before, but we don't have that sort of space in Australia. There's just not really the volume of people, is there? But off-Broadway, for the people who are listening who don't understand the concepts, is that a lot of shows get put on off-Broadway or in smaller theatres in the US before they come to a bigger theatre, and they take feedback from people. And one that I know of and you mentioned Dean Bryant, the one that I know of was Dear Evan Hansen.
That's right.
Because it went through a huge audience development stage with, lots of feedback from audiences before it got anywhere near Broadway. And it was a huge Broadway production, and it's gone all around, and now Dean is doing it in Australia. But that didn't happen. That took a long time for it to happen.
It takes, I believe, the kind of average period of time for a Broadway show, a Broadway musical to get to Broadway on average is between 7 and 10 years. We're on year 4.
Yeah. And, the people who Miranda probably had in her mind as maybe the people who would perform those characters, they are now 4 years older than what they were then. That's and, by the time it comes to stage, so the thought around all of that and the conception and how it's going to come to the stage.
Yeah, we're constantly changing, constantly adapting for new artists and new audiences even. What audiences might expect today might be different from what they expect 4 years from now.
Yeah.
And, but it's really exciting to be able to watch what was already a beautiful show become even more wonderful. And I think, I don't know, I know in my gut that this is something that has the potential to be really quite special as part of the Australian musical theatre canon.
Yeah.
And do you think the Australian market is mature enough for a new Australian musical? Because we see all the big rehashing of the same musicals over and over again.
Yeah.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
It's a really good question. I think we are, but I don't think we've given our audiences the benefit of the doubt enough yet.
Right, we're playing it too safe?
Yeah, I think we are playing it too safe. I think if we look at London and if we look at New York as examples, yes, their population is much larger, but culturally, we as a culture are very passionate about the arts and about theater and that kind of creative life and storytelling, just as much as they are. But the risk aversion that exists here because our populations are smaller, I understand that, is so much greater that I think it's going to take a bit of kind of being in a scary place for a short period of time in order to create space for these new shows where audiences can go, oh, well, there's no, Hamilton and Mamma Mia and Grease aren't coming here this year. There's just X, Y, and Z. Yeah. Grinning Man, Paper Stars, and question mark. Yeah. So let's take a punt.
Yeah.
And I think when they do take that punt, it's such an incredible creative experience because it is something new. It's speaking to us on a different level and we're seeing new things. And I mean, trying something new is exhilarating. And I think in life in general, and I think new theater has that potential as well, but we just need to create the space to let that happen so audiences can say, hey, I'm gonna give it a shot, because I think we kind of crave it.
I think you're right. And I think the smaller companies, the ones that I know in Victoria in particular, that are taking the punt and doing shows that nobody's ever heard of, or perhaps doing a show that people have heard of before but conceiving it differently, and the audiences are sitting there and watching it saying, this is really cool. Like I know recently there was a production where they a theatre company did Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, and it was all female cast.
That's right. Watch this. They do it right.
It was pretty much a sellout. It was really cool to reconceptualize something that you've seen before, because old musicals are not necessarily current with today's different circumstances, and so sometimes they do need a little bit of a rethink and a refresh. But with new shows as well, the smaller theatre companies here really taking a punt and doing some fun stuff, and not even always just fun stuff, but sometimes it's really confronting as well, but really getting good quality feedback from audiences. So I think you're right. There's the bigger companies don't give enough credit to their audience here, who are.
Yeah, I think, and when in those times that they really do, and as I said before, I think I understand why it's so important to play it safe when so much money is on the line.
Absolutely.
And
Performers need jobs, totally
the careers
get those
of
productions
hundreds
here.
and thousands of artists need to be supported. Yeah. But it is really exciting to see when kind of they do take a punt, like Michael Castle Group doing Dorian Gray, not a musical,
but look what happened.
Yeah, and now it's on the West End.
Yeah,
and that's so exciting.
Amazing.
And I think those being able to take those punts and having big companies like that be able to, in another time, in another way, maybe soon, to be able to say, hey, other company, you're doing amazing things. Let us support you in that. On the way, we can't take the full punt because we need to, cover our bases here in the commercial space. But I see what you're doing. I recognize it. Yeah. And I think it can make a creative difference in this industry and in our creative community, and just like really juicy up our arts culture, our arts scene that much more.
Yeah.
Juicy up. I don't think that's a thing, but it is now.
We've just made it a thing. We're juicing it up. I want to talk a little bit more about Hatch Lab, because I think it's a really important thing that Salty has as part of its suite of things. Yeah. Tell us about the way, like, I know that COVID came about, and so obviously things like Hatch Lab could not happen because they require workshopping and face-to-face and things like that. But as a concept, why is that really important for you?
The Hatch Lab as a concept is really important because it gives artists a platform and I guess a safety net to be able to create new work and know that there are people who are participating in that can amplify what they're trying to build. So they know that they're feeling supported, much like Vast Productions and the Alex Theatre are supporting Salty at the moment. I wouldn't be able to do the-grinning-man as I'm doing it now if it weren't for them, and for that I'm so incredibly grateful.
I think that's a point I'd just interject with that and say is that if you're here in Melbourne and you're listening to this podcast, there is a theatre in St Kilda that you probably don't know exists, because I'm a pretty avid theatre goer, and before Ashley told me she was joining up with Vast Productions and the Alex Theatre, I had no idea there was a theatre where it is. Yeah. So whereabouts is it? Just so that we can I'll just interject with that.
So interject, and we'll pop back to the Hatch Lab in a second. But the Alex Theatre is on Fitzroy Street in St Kilda. It's not far from the Prince Hotel, so go get your food and get your beer and get over there. it's beautiful. It's this gorgeous old space. It has so much character. There are 3 different spaces, a 500-seat space, or 450, 245-seat space, and a studio space. So there's just all of this opportunity to try new things and to have live music. They do cinema showings. And I think part of why we gel so much and why they were able to come on and support me and support Salty Theatre is because they and Alec Vass, who's the patron there, who owns the theatre and is supporting me, they are such believers in creating quality work and supporting artists and doing things in an outside the box way and not just rehashing the same projects. So we're very much in alignment with what we're trying to build and create. So yeah, if you haven't been there yet, please go check it out. It's beautiful and exciting, and we just want to keep growing that space because it has so much potential.
Yeah, we will put links to the social media of Alex Theatre in the information for the podcast, so people will be able to find it easily because, it's a bit of a shame that more people don't know it exists. But let's go back to Hatch Lab and then we'll talk a bit more about what you do at Alex Theatre, because there's another thing I'll ask you after the Hatch Lab convo.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Hatch Lab. I really wanted to create a platform where new musicals could be supported in a safe space with the guidance of mentors and people who have been there before and done it before. And to, I guess, also within that, give these artists the opportunity to build collateral so they can then take their show and continue to workshop it and package it and pitch it to other theaters. Yeah.
Which is a big thing because people don't go to university to learn how to be a writer of musical theatre, do they?
Like, no, unless you're going to like Tisch in New York.
Exactly. And, we're not really. No. Like there's they only take 10 people or something a year.
Yeah,
so.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. They don't, really, truly, artists here who are writing new musicals, they do it in their free time and that they make that time. Like it doesn't exist. We're all working. We're all just trying to survive.
Yeah.
But they spend hours and days and months and years. Like Miranda and Luke and Grace have been working on Paper Stars and doing rewrites for 4 years. They don't get paid to do that.
Yeah.
And that's what, with this next iteration, we're raising funds so we can be able to give them some money to continue with the next development.
Yeah.
But the really money doesn't come until their show is up and running and they're getting licensing fees. Up until that time, 9 times out of 10, it's a passion project unless you get super lucky and there's a company that goes, hey, I'm going to put some money into this because I want to take it right away. But that doesn't really happen here. Companies, large companies, commercial companies need to see an iteration of a product first before they're willing to take a risk and say, okay, this, because then they'll say, okay, I think this is good enough. We can fix this, this, and that. But when it's new and just on stage in a purely development form, that again, we're going back to that. That's too risky.
Yeah. Broadway bar.
Yeah.
Because this is a bit of fun that people who are listening may be able to get themselves down to because it's fun. So tell us about Broadway Bar and give a plug to the show, to dates and stuff like that.
So Broadway Bar is essentially a live piano music theater karaoke night.
And it happens in other places, doesn't it? So like Broadway Bar as a concept, that's the name of what you do here as Salty at Alex Theatre, but it exists in the other theatre capitals of the world.
That's
so
right.
It's very cool that we've got it in Melbourne because it doesn't happen in the other states of Australia. So it's a Melbourne thing and therefore it's a London thing and it's a New York thing. So
that's right. And so the wonderful Stacey Louise Camilleri actually brought the concept to my attention because we'd been doing some kind of industry nights and she went, I've kind of done this thing before, but I'd like to really give it a crack. And what if I played the piano and we get people to come in and just sing whatever the heck they want as long as it's from a Broadway show? And I was like, okay, that sounds great. Let's give it a crack. And so we've had 3 now. And with each night it has grown. We're getting more and more people in, and it's so exciting because and it's kind of something for everyone. Like we truly have had people from like 16 years old who love musical theater and just want to get up and sing to people who are in their, 70s who are there just to take a listen because they love theater. Some of them have gotten up and sang. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. We've got regulars now, which is really exciting. People that keep coming back every month. It's a great place for young musical theater people who might be studying to get up and try new audition songs. If there's a song that you don't think you'd ever sing in real life, you can get up and sing that. And we also have just tons of people who are just there to enjoy it and soak up the atmosphere and have a great night out. So we do that every third Friday of the month at 7:30. So next Friday, February 16th, will be our next Broadway bar. And then again, the third Friday in March. I think because of a couple of shows that are happening at the space, we'll be changing a couple nights, but typically it's the third Friday of every month. It's 2 hours of just musical theater madness. And what's really beautiful, you'll get some amazing performers up there who belt their faces off and they're stunning. But we also get people up there who've never sung in public before, who really love theater and just want to kind of try. And that's when it gets really special because everyone that's sitting in the space, in the crowd, is so supportive. It's like a stadium sound full of people cheering them on when they get up and try something.
I'm not sure that they would cheer if Shane was singing.
Probably not. I don't think I'd be game enough to get up either. So,
well, we're there for you to support you when you're ready.
Okay, I think that there could be a little bit of a coaching, mentoring thing with Ash
maybe
going
if Ash
on here.
sings at the same time and you can't hear me, you can only hear Ash.
She has done that. Well, not with someone who's bad. Sorry for anybody who's sung with Ash before.
But we can also the other really exciting thing is we give people an opportunity when they write down like a song that they want. If they don't want to sing it by themselves, they write group beside the song name. Okay. And then Stacey starts playing and starts singing, and like everyone sings. So at the end of the last Broadway bar, I'm such a nerd, we did One Day More from Les Mis, and that day we had the wonderful Mark Bradley on piano, and everyone started singing in the audience. And then like 4-part harmonies started breaking out, and it was amazing. It sounded so great, and everyone was having a blast. And so like group numbers happened throughout the night too for those people who are too shy to get up and sing on their own. And it's just a very cool. If you like musicals, if you like Broadway, come out to Broadway Bar, and it's only a $5 cover charge, so we can pay the pianist. And it's a really great
and there's
night
drinks.
out.
You can get drinks at the bar.
At the bar, they do specialty cocktails based on musicals as well.
So that's super. I love a specialty cocktail. Yeah, I will not sing though.
You don't have to sing.
Yeah,
you just lay back and enjoy.
I'll just sit and listen to everybody else's
on your
talent.
Comfy red couch.
There's a bit of a secret talent there.
There is not. There is. No, there's not. We'll move on from there.
Give her a specialty cocktail and get her on stage.
I'm nodding, yes.
No, I'll leave that to the kids. They're much better at it than me. So last question, and we almost always finish with this question. And I know that you've got Grinning-Man coming up and you've got Paper Stars, but there's a bigger plan. What is it? What's the bigger plan for Ashley and Salty Theatre, and where do you want to – where would you love to be in, say, 12 and 18 months' time?
Oh, my goodness. I would love to be in a position where we're producing 2, I guess, main stage shows in a year at the same time as developing a new Australian work. And not stressing about how we're going to pay for all of it.
Yeah. So anybody with some money who's out there listening today, please be in
more.
touch. So Ashley's happy to talk to you about funding. So,
and I think that's it, to know that we can regularly put 2 amazing shows on every year to support artists, to engage audiences, and always know that there's a new work kind of on the burner as well, because I think it's so important to not let those sit for too long, and to not create a space where it becomes just like a one and done. Like we premiered that, now it's done, and you never see that Australian musical again. To be able to continue to build that show and build those relationships and be a space that artists can come to where they know they're going to have an amazing opportunity to create in a really big way, know they are being paid to do it, know that they feel completely supported, and just be that theater company that is taking risks to create a really exciting new space for musical theater in Australia.
Yeah, I think that's pretty impressive.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's why you're sitting over that side of the table, and we love to be the people sort of propping and pushing and supporting, because that's an exciting thing for us. Our our kids are theatre kids, and there's a lot of kids out there who need that opportunity because they may never see it in a big production. And so it's really cool. And I think that if we could, if there is anyone out there who wants to give Ash some cash, she will not say no.
Won't say no. I'll give you tickets at opening night.
Yeah, you get really good perks. I can guarantee there's some very good perks involved with being involved in Salty Theatre and what Ashley's doing. So thank you so much for taking time out today.
Oh, and thank you.
Really
I wouldn't
appreciate
be here without
it.
you guys.
Well,
and I don't mean just right now in this podcast. I mean just in general. You've been such a gift to me, so thank you.
Well, we've really enjoyed being part of Salty Theatre and your life and the lives of the people around you. So thank you for coming today, and looking forward to everything that's coming next.
Can't wait.
Thanks, Ash.
Great. Thanks.